All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It depends on what time you're listening. Could be anywhere in this country, in the world. Hey, we hope you're everywhere. But welcome to The Solution. Nothing changes if we change nothing. We're the New York City Prevention Resource Center. And I'm Ronnie.
I'm Chevar. Yeah, so
Yeah.
we are.
And we're here today.
Yeah, this is a pretty interesting episode. Normally we have a separate guest on, but this is just us.
I know.
Yeah,
Only the second time we're doing this.
and we are actually the guest. You
Yes.
know, and I think it's what I like about the topic or the theme. Host to host. Uh, it allows the listeners to get to know who we are, and we talked about this offline. There's gonna be parts who may be more vulnerable. We get to show our human side. And that means we can say no, that's too much, and that's okay. In humans, people who are listening, it's okay to say that you're uncomfortable with a question or a thought. And it's not a bad thing that the person asks the question or says the thing and say, sometimes it's purely out of curiosity that someone might want to know something.
Absolutely. And if I can recover the other side of my head, I'll be fine. Okay. But yeah, I mean, I think one of our ground rules should be, hey, to be able to say, I'm going to pass on that question and not have to explain why.
Yeah. And that's totally fine, and I'm all for like, okay. And at a later date, I might ask, hey, is it okay if I ask you? But if the person at the time doesn't feel comfortable, it's all right. Again, it's okay to be human. I always say that over and over. Allow the person, the individual, the group, the people to be human.
That's all any of us really are.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'll apologize in advance for having to turn around constantly, but I have an 11-year-old dog sleeping in back of me who likes to chew on her feet. And I want to make sure she doesn't do that because she tends to irritate things. The other one's in the other room, so I only have to look one way today.
Ronnie, guess what? That's okay.
That is okay.
And this is where we are in our normal. Not new normal. Our normal. This is our normal. Being home, working from home. I'm sorry.
Yes.
I
think over this last year, we've tried to be that. Be who we are. The new normal thing is like, hey, we're just on a different medium, but this is what we do anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like my son, he's playing video games right now, so he's not gonna bother me. Or he might, because he probably heard me say something. He's probably shouting, I want to be on your podcast. Eventually he will.
We always enjoy having a visit from him, though.
But how are you? What's our first question? What's our first where do we go from here?
I don't know. Would you like me to start, or you want to start?
You can start. Go ahead. I've learned to become an open book. I've learned to become that to an extent. There are chapters that are still, stuck together.
I'll ask a pretty easy one to start. What have been some of your favorite destinations through your life?
Destinations. Well, that's a very interesting question because destinations could be anything as far as like travel, people we've met, times in my life. I'll start with travel. My favorite places I've been. Wow, that's a good one. I've gone to Belize to visit my mother in my father's home country, it was just cool for me, being a tourist in their home country. Going to see the Mayan ruins, and it's one of the coolest things in the world. I love travel. I went to Dubai, which I thought was awesome. I would love to move there if I could afford it and move there and just move there and be there. One of the coolest places I've ever been is like a modern city, a city that, and I'm going to say this, I'm a New Yorker and I shouldn't say this, a city that New York should be.
Wow.
That's a big statement. If I'm from a New Yorker, you know how we feel about New York. That's another one. As far as, well, I mean, I've been to other places, but those are two places that stuck out to me the most. But destinations in life, I mean, and I probably talk about this a lot, but the most important destination in my life is becoming a dad. Like that travel, that time, that place is like, again, this is me. I can only speak for me. I can't speak for any other parents in this world. Becoming a dad, seeing the birth of my children, like, wow, being in shock. I'm like, I just became a dad. When my daughter was born and my son was like, again, this is a thing. they come out of that. I'm sorry. We all know what that is, and I apologize if I upset anyone by saying by calling the human anatomy of that. It's like, but it was like, wow, it's one of the coolest things, watching them grow up, you know, seeing them mimic you. It's things that my daughter does that I've never told her about that I've done when I was her age. Like she goes by Kayla the Great. And I'm like, it's interesting because when I was her age, I called myself King Chevar.
Doesn't fall far.
It's like, and I've never, ever, ever told her that. I've never told her that until like recently. I'm like, dude, you know that you might not believe me, but this Kayla the Great thing actually comes from me without me telling you this. Like I didn't, because like, and she's like, what do you mean? I explained it to her, and I always try not to put my experiences out there because I want my children to live their own experiences. I want them to have their own feelings. Like, I don't put my fears out there. So that wasn't a fear for me. Like, I just didn't share that. I didn't think it was cool. I thought I was an arrogant young person who just, just was full of confidence. And as far as my son, when I was younger, grew up in the early hip hop age, and I had a high top fade, and I had a dyed streak in my head, a blonde streak in my hair. And my son, around the same age, gets this mohawk, and he wanted to dye his hair. He wanted to put some dye in his hair, but we didn't allow him. I gave him the spray dye, and he dyed his hair a blonde streak in his hair. I'm like, what is going on? And I've never told them this. I never even showed them pictures of this hairstyle. So to even see that, that's why it's so cool that you are ingrained in their DNA and in their future without even mentioning it. So those are the destinations that I could say stuck out to me the most. And what about you?
Well, I didn't do a lot of travel through my early adult and mid-adult years. A lot of it had to do with my drug addiction. Right. All my money went to drugs, to be honest. But I used to do a lot of camping, and I was in a band. Started as a trio. This was in the late 70s to the mid 80s. And the band was called Three Penny Opera. We were a 6-piece all-female country band. Right. Hot country. And we used to go into the woods to write songs. And we discovered this place. We didn't do these like organized camping trips. We were a bunch of crazy people. And I don't say that to negate anybody, but I mean just like wild youth. That's where we were at. And we would pile into the van and just say, let's just go to Connecticut. And we would not know where we were going. We'd have food with us. We'd have tents. We'd have sleeping bags, guitars, maybe a dog or two. And we would just go. And one time we went and we couldn't find any place to camp. We stopped somebody in, I think it was around Kent, Connecticut. And we asked any good places. And they directed us to something called Music Mountain, which was kind of ironic since the trio was there together to write songs. And we went there and we hiked all the way into the woods. It was close to a mile in, to a place called Dean's Ravine. And it was on the Appalachian Trail. And it was the most placid, serene, inspirational place I've ever been in my life. We were hiking. We see this babbling brook on our left, and it's just raging. And then we get to a clearing where you could set up your tent and a little bridge that goes over the stream. And that's where we set up. And we went back there so many times after that. That became our songwriting, our creative space. And it was one of the most incredible places I've ever been. Hikers would come through who were going on through the whole Appalachian Trail. And we would talk to them. We would sing in the dark in the woods around the fire, and people would come out of the woods and say, what are we hearing? And it was there was something very spiritual and very connected for me about that place. That's probably my favorite destination ever. I got to go do a lot with camp. I'd say the White Mountains in New Hampshire are a second one. That was pretty incredible. So, I did get to go to California twice, drove the Pacific Coast Highway all the way up to San Francisco, and loved that. But if I had to choose one, I'd probably go back to Dean's Ravine. Okay. And just sit there with my guitar and just sit with my feet dangling off the little bridge. And, we used to bathe in the stream, just follow it down to a waterfall and take a shower. So that would have to be my favorite destination as far as travel. As far as personal, My favorite destination, it's still a journey, but it was to the rooms of the fellowship where I found my recovery.
Wow. Okay.
That was probably the most important one of my life. It was very, very powerful to walk into a meeting and hear my story and know I was in the right place. After 28 years of just going back and forth into an abyss. And then I found the miracle. So I guess that would be how I'd have to answer that.
So listening to you talk and knowing you for 2 years now, it's been 2 years, people.
Yeah, it is 2 years.
And this is a term that gets used a lot, creative. You know, like, what does a creative space look like to you? Like, how does it make you feel? How do you get there? You know, and is it necessary?
My creativity takes so many avenues.
Right.
I mean, what we're doing right now is part of both of our creativity. I think the work we invented over the last year comes out of our creative selves. For me, though, when I'm really creative in my music or in my writing, it's not forced. It just comes out of my soul.
Right.
And it hits me out of the blue. I get an inspiration. I mean, that's most of my songs. Almost every song I've written has been something hit me and I just in the moment started to write. There have been a few that I got the words for before and then went back and wrote the melody, but it's rare that I do it through an assignment kind of thing. But that's not to say it hasn't happened. I did something many years ago called The Artist's Way. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
Well, it's a program, and it came out in a book, but it used to be a program, I think, at Columbia University, or I'm not even sure. I could be making this up, but it was one of the schools in New York. And they had this course you could take called The Artist's Way to get in touch with your inner artist. And I had hit a wall, and I felt like I wasn't finding my artist anymore. So I did The Artist's Way, and every morning I'd have to wake up and do what they call 3 morning pages. As soon as I woke up, I would write 3 pages, whatever came to mind. In my case, in my journal, I wrote to John Lennon, and I would every morning write, "Dear John." Well, I did that for years after that. But then it had assignments like take your artist on a date once a week. So I would book a date for my artist. We'd go to a park. We'd go to some beautiful place. And it got me back to writing again. So creating that inner space, it's not about the room I'm in. It's not about the car I'm in. It's not about the train. It's what's going on within me, and creating that atmosphere. I haven't been creative musically the way I wanted to be this last year. And I need to, because I feel it, but I'll write down snippets. I mean, how many times have I written the solution? Nothing changes if we change nothing in the song, but I need to create a better creative space. And I think that means surrendering myself to the creativity.
No, while you were talking, I do know The Artist's Way. I know the workbook. I do, because someone recommended to me a while ago. I'm like, I know this. I had to look it up. There is the book, Julia Cameron. If anyone's interested who wants to participate in being creative and documenting your creative path. As far as me, like, wow, I struggle with that. Because it's similar to you, like it just comes. Like I'll 3 o'clock in the morning, wake up, okay, let's create. like I used to design clothes. I would just like I get lost in creativity. Like I love if you give me a project about creating something that that's outside of the box, or I could put my own spin on it. Whether it's fashion, whether it's graffiti, music, podcasting, like that's to be honest, that's my safe space. That's my prevention.
Yeah.
Like, dude, I tagged on the walls. I'm not gonna sit here and lie. I wrote graffiti. I wrote graffiti. I tagged on a bunch of things I probably shouldn't have, but that was my youth of. If I had the option, I can drink and get high with my friends and go write some graffiti or play basketball. Graffiti I could do by myself. Basketball it's more or less you're training by yourself, but with a group of friends, they would rather go drink and smoke. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go get a can. And I'm not promoting that, even though I am, whatever. That was a part of my youth. it was my safe space. You know, even to this day, where I get up, I open up Photoshop, or I open up. I have like a ton of like sketchbooks, and I'll write down ideas. Actually, a few months ago, I wanted to design. I thought of designing a sofa, a couch, and I learned that there's totally two different meanings to sofa and couch. Like I studied the whole history of this. And I'll share it with you offline.
I didn't know this.
Like there's a whole history about why one is different. And I'm like, wow. And I started looking at fabrics and it's just like, and I got lost in it. And I forgot what everything else that was bothering me, I forgot about in that moment. Like, so when I'm in that, it's a term called hyper focus. I get hyper focused. I'm only focused on that particular thing. So creativity is like, it's my safe space, man. Like, I love it. Like, you know, doing the podcast, like as soon as the mic comes on, you know, whatever's bothering me, if it's detrimental, it kind of still bothers me. I'm not gonna say it a lot, but for the most part, I forget about it. I just go and it happens, and I'm like listening, like, oh my God, I'm in this. You know, when I'm drawing, like when I go to when we were allowed to go to CACA, I would take a sketchbook and I would just sit down and just draw while I wait for the next workshop. And just sit there and draw, and I wouldn't hear anything around me, not a sound, not a peep.
I'm like that too. I know I drive my wife crazy sometimes like that, because she'll be talking to me. I'm like, didn't you hear me? I said, no, I was watching the show. That's all I could hear.
Basically, like, even in my phone, I have poetry. Like I sit there and I just write and write and write. And it's my space where I have to get those thoughts out, whether it's drawing, whether it's working on a post for my personal self, looking up what's the difference between a sofa and a couch. Like, I didn't know there was a big history in two different regions. Like,
no, when you just said that about your phone, I'm pulling up, I'm looking at all the different things I started on here to write. I wrote a lot of things. You know, I wrote the things and nothing changes if we change nothing. I wrote a love song on here. It's so funny, like the moon, and then words I've been dealing with for years, like the moon in the daytime sky. I felt so out of place, never knowing if I should try to fit in or just escape.
Whoa.
And that's followed me around for years. This image of the moon in the daytime sky, you know, just what it means. So I hear you on that. I do the same thing. When we have our NYC pop meetings, it is such a creative space.
Very much so.
We're very lucky.
So. No, I like that part of the work. You know, anytime when somebody say create, I'm like, all right, Chevar's there. I'm like, I don't mind the numbers and the words and all that stuff. It's cool, but there's nothing like sitting with a group of people and creating and because like there's so much going on. We're doing it with my NYC Pop Partners of Prevention. That's our social media campaign that's involved the entire city, but that it's nationwide because other people are on the Nation Post. Plug. NYC Pop hashtag. What's cool about it is, although you know I'm there, you know I'm creating, people are sharing ideas, or they're looking for pictures or doing background check or the research that was there. So there's a lot happening. Opposed to us focusing on one thing, there's so much creativity happening, and you can watch people, their juices are flowing, they're happy. Like, all right, cool. I'm writing the blurb while this person's writing the cat, like, you know, the doing the like, you know, making sure that the website is correct. It all comes together. It's so cool. It's so, like, for me, like seeing that process, that's what a project is. Like each of those posts for me are a project.
Yeah. Yeah. And we get to do it every week. And that's such a blessing, and do it with so many wonderful people around the city.
I have another question for you.
Go for it.
I mean, I don't really jump ahead, but you know me, I sit here and I'm like, these things come in my head and I just have to ask.
They marinate.
Yes, they do. How was it growing up for you as a youth?
How was it growing up? Well,
you could go anywhere, whether it was sports or trials and tribulations. You can go wherever you want to go.
All of the above. You know, I had an interesting childhood. I had a really enriching childhood. I was born in the projects in the Bronx, lived there the first 6 years of my life. That's all kids played together there.
Right.
It was a loving atmosphere. The mothers would be hanging out the window calling us,
Nice.
upstairs. We went trick or treating in the building.
Nice.
It really set my foundation. Then we moved to Bayside. I lived there for 5 years. That was probably the hardest part of my childhood.
Hmm.
We moved to a neighborhood where I was the only Jewish child in the entire area. My mother had seen a Jewish center being built like several blocks away and figured it was a mixed neighborhood, but it wasn't. And I was the only Jew, and I was taunted and teased and
Oh,
harassed
wow.
from the time I was 6 years old.
Oh, wow.
They would take a string and it wasn't a big string, but it was a string. So the Jew would choke when she rode her bike, and
Oh, wow.
neck level, or they'd stand outside my house and chant about being a Jew bastard, or
Oh,
when I had the
wow.
chicken pox, I was an itchy Jew, or it was just really a gang. I call them a gang, but they were my friends. I thought there were 4 or 5
Right.
kids, and there was just one instigator who was very hateful, and she wasn't. I can't blame her for being who she was completely. She was a kid and she heard it at home, and she just led the other kids, and
Right.
but they were the only kids I had on the block. So
Right.
and I had some good times with them, but for me, I don't see it as this horrible curse, because it gave me insight that I don't think I ever would have. And
Right.
it also made me say, I can't treat anybody like this. I have to really know who people are, and not judge them like that. Or, it showed me what bigotry and prejudice can be.
Right.
And then we wound up leaving that neighborhood, and moved to Whitestone, which is, definitely a step up. It's one of the best school districts and the widest in New York City, in Queens. And the kids there were welcoming and loving. We had a pretty diverse neighborhood for that area, and I got to know a lot of people, and my whole life changed when we moved there, as did my mother's, because she met my future stepfather.
Mhm.
My parents were in a pretty miserable marriage, but I still enjoyed my life, and it was my creativity. My parents' marriage was falling apart. I was organizing a clubhouse with my friends, and giving concerts in backyards when we were 11 and 12 years old, and doing carnivals, and just my mother was my creative force. She would sit down with me, and we would write songs together when I was 5, 6 years old.
Nice.
And
Nice.
and I wanted to play the guitar, and I wanted to play from the time I was 4. And I told my
Nice.
mother, I want to be like the Everly Brothers. And I want to be like
Nice.
Elvis. And my mother was this young, crazy, I keep using the word crazy, I don't mean to, my young, exciting woman.
Right. Right.
And she would dance in front of the TV to Elvis, and got me to love music. And she got me my first guitar when I was 7. And I never looked back. And so I think I had a really wonderful childhood,
Mhm.
even though there was so much tension in the
Mhm.
house, and my parents' marriage was just not a good one. They were not well matched. They were both good people, but just didn't belong together.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
I still had this incredible relationship with my mother, and this incredible
Mhm.
creative force going on, so that I didn't know that it was like that in my house. I mean, I saw it
Right.
happening. It affected me, obviously. I
Right.
went down some paths that weren't that positive, but she made life wonderful for me. I always felt loved. I always felt accepted and supported. And I don't know, my mom was, for those who watched it, my mom was Lorelai Gilmore, like in the Gilmore Girls. She was the mother that everyone wanted to gravitate to. She was the cool mom. And it made my life a lot better. I had a brother. I still have a brother. We had very different experiences. He's 8 years older, so he was an only child. And then I came into the family, and everybody was so happy that a girl in the family, and it wasn't fair to him. So a lot of things were difficult and challenging, but because of the mom I had and survival skills, and maybe growing up in the projects, I never knew it. It never
Right.
really affected me in that way. I always looked for the positive. I always saw the glasses half full,
Right.
or even full. A lot of
Right.
times, I still do today. So I think a lot of those values that were imparted to me really made my life growing up to be somewhat enchanted in many ways. Being,
Mhm.
even though the problems were there, I wasn't forced to dwell in them. I was given ways to just enjoy my life and be a kid. And, no matter what is going on in a child's life, if they have a loving, positive adult, and I had teachers and friends, parents, you could have a really good childhood no matter what, unless there's major abuse going on, of course. But so my life was good, I'd say. The darker places I got to with my own, because of me, because of my own choices and my own path. And as it was, I made a choice one day to do something better with my life and get into recovery. And that one choice that day, and that, since then, 23 and a half years later, the trajectory of my life changed. So in maybe 3 minutes, I just told you about 68 years of living. How would you respond to that question?
I had a sort of a similar experience to you when you were younger also, but around the same age or elementary age, because my parents are from this country. And I shared it earlier, my mom, my father, they're both from Belize. They actually met here in the States, in New York. So, that's how I was birthed, born in Harlem Hospital. And the part that I'm referring to is that growing up, my mom having an accent, my father being a dread, people treated me differently. So I had two homes. I go home, I would go to a Belizean household, but when I would go to school, it was an American thing. So it wasn't the same to me. People would say, "Oh, your mother's Jamaican." Like, no, she's not. Your mother's from an island. Belize is not an island. It's part of Central America. So I'm like, as a young age, I'm teaching people about geography and ethnicity and culture, like, and people didn't understand, like, and you're right. It's hard being a child because people, when things are different and they don't understand it, it's like, I'm going to make fun of it because it doesn't make sense to me. Mm-hmm. So and I agree with you. It made me feel uncomfortable. It made me kind of like, I had this thing where I wore glasses, so people would call me nerd. I hate the term nerd because it's used as it's used negatively. When you look up the definition, pretty much anyone who knows a lot is a nerd. That's pretty much. You could be a sports nerd, you could be a music nerd. So like, and there's a definition about people with glasses and all this other stuff, but then it's kind of whack, and people would call me names and what have you. And what I did as a youngster, I made sure I still did good in school, but I made sure, because I never understood why people didn't like me. So I made sure to be better than them at what they did. So I knew why you didn't like me. So if you played basketball, I would train and work out with my friends, go to the gym at a young age and learn how to play basketball and be better than you. So I understood you don't like me because I'm better than you at what you do. That was my way of coping with it, because I'm like, why don't you like me? I don't bother you. I don't bother anyone. I don't make fun of people. I don't do those things. I'm happy-go-lucky, always smiling, having fun, and people would, so I made it a point to best them at what, give them a reason to dislike me. In that young age, like I was lucky enough that the school, so my mom moved around. Some of you, I was 6 years old, I lived in one neighborhood, and I moved to another neighborhood. In the neighborhood I lived when I was 6, everyone knew my mom. They knew, my background. And my mom did as a compromise, instead of giving me dreads, she gave me braids. So she's like, I'm not going to give him dreads. He'll have braids. He'll have the long hair. And when I was growing up, boys didn't have long hair. So it was taboo for young men to have long hair. Cut your hair, It was that time where only girls have long hair. And when at home, it's natural, right? And when you go into the quote unquote real world, it's not a thing. I know I'm pretty sure you're probably hippie. No, it's like people grow hair. So I remember in the school I had this long hair, and I remember when my mom moved, I went to another school, and there's a picture in my mom's house. There's only one picture I didn't smile, and it's hung up in her house. And the reason for that, I remember on picture day, I was 7 years old, and I had this green outfit on. I remember like it was yesterday. The teacher, there were 2 or 3 women, and they told me I looked like a girl, and they untied my hair and tied it back. She said, we're doing this so you can look like a boy. And that stuck with me. that stuck with me. I'm like, it made me even distance myself from adults. What I learned at that age of 7 was, right, how could I not talk to you? You know, like, so that's what it was like. And I tell this to my kids: if you do all of your work, no one will ever talk to you or bother you. No one will ask you a question. You know, and it was like, oh, Chevar is such a good kid. I'm like, and I learned this from my staff. Like, it was, oh, such and such is such a good kid. And I would say, how do you know? Because they do all their work. That doesn't mean they're a good kid. It just means they don't want to talk to you. And I base it off experience. Like, I just didn't want to talk to you. So if I do all my work, you won't bother me. You won't say a word to me. And that was something, I mean, I did most of my childhood, like, just so I, like, because adults are just as mean as the children. They would pick on you because you're different, and because they had a favorite child. They would call you names, and I'm like, all right, cool. How do I not get you to never bother me? And I would befriend the principal. Like, I would make friends with other adults that I know that cared, so I didn't have to bother with you. Like, oh, I mean, I'm not saying I was a bad kid. I was never a bad kid. I'm just saying you didn't know that I was a good kid only because I did my work. That's why I was a good kid. Not because did you know that I drew? Did you know that I was into music? What did you actually know about me, other than I did my classwork?
That says a lot, or a little.
So like that's
that's so awful though that they made you change your hair because of their definition of what a boy should look like.
Yeah. And it was, they didn't understand it was cultural. Like, that was a part of my culture. You stole my culture from me in that moment.
That's right.
You robbed me of my identity in that moment. So it's like, and it kind of molded me where it's like, it made it harder to, it kind of forced me to conform to American values, you know, opposed to it kind of like, you know, and this happens with any teen, or you start to rebel against what's at home. Because conformity, because you want to fit in. Like, it's not that, and it wasn't even that I wanted to fit in. I just want people to talk to me and ask me questions that they didn't feel like. I got tired of explaining things to you. Like, me coming to school with a high top fade and blonde in my hair. I was the only kid in my school who did that. Like, I didn't care. It was just something I did.
Because you were cool. You were a trendsetter.
It was just something I wanted to do. And without, you know, and people ask questions like, this is something that I'm into. This is the kind of clothes or kind of music. I read comic books, you know. I remember, you know, learning how to draw because, and again, at a young age, because I would trace first. I would trace comic books. And that's how I learned how to draw. And I became a pretty good artist at a young age. I mean, moving towards my teens, sports were a big part of what I did. Like I said, I did it purely because I needed to understand, you know, why do you like this so much, and why do you hate me so much?
That's heartbreaking when you say it like that. When you were talking about, you know, what they did with your hair, it reminded me of something that happened to me also. I had started playing guitar at 7, and my mother sent me to like a community group where I learned with the other kids in a class, and we sang all like old folk songs. And when I was 8, she sent me for private lessons, because I really wanted to improve. And the teacher I had, first thing this man said to me was, well, I don't really care if you knew how to play. Forget everything you knew, because I'm going to teach you how to really play.
Right.
That was the first thing he told me. I was 7 years old and knew every chord. He told me to forget it. And he started teaching me things I didn't want to learn. And I was like, I don't want to learn that song. I want to play Jailhouse Rock, you know, or Bye Bye Love. He's teaching me Camptown Races. And, you know, and I was miserable. And I stopped practicing because I just didn't want to play for this man. And I came in one day and he said, my nails were too long. You got to keep your nails shorter. And he grabbed my hand and he took one of those big shears, those heavy, office shears, and he cut my fingernails with them. And when my mother came to pick me up, I was really upset. So she went to talk to him. And he said, you're wasting your money. She has no talent. And my mother just looked at him and she just, you know, with disgust and told him off, because she always stood up for me. Right. And she was honest with me. She told me what he said. She said, I don't believe that, but this is what he said. And I just was so down about it. I stopped playing for 2 years, and I gave up my dream for a while. And then 2.5 years later, we were moving, and I had nothing to do. And I was sitting in a room with boxes while the moving truck was coming, and a guitar. And I took out a guitar book and learned every chord in the book in 2 hours. And when my mother came in, I said, okay, I know all the chords now. And she was like, see, you know how to play and you could do this. And she encouraged me. And I mean, that first guitar she got was green stamps. But then after that, she got me another guitar. And I just started playing on my own. And she just encouraged me, you don't need lessons, you can learn. Wow. And I went on to become a professional musician. I always wanted to go back to him, but I don't think he was still alive, and say, oh, you remember me? I'm the one you said had no talent. You want to hear my record? You know, but I remember the damage, you know, but thankfully I had a mom who wouldn't let me lose, you know, faith in myself, and said, you know, just because he said it doesn't mean it's true. But I remember that feeling, that powerlessness of an adult who just does something to destroy who you are.
Absolutely. I mean, it did change a lot in me, you know. I mean, and like I said, it robbed me of things, and that's why when I became a program director in my adult age, I made sure to encourage the youth that I worked with. I didn't encourage the youth, encourage the adults, like empower them, because it's like really important. I'm big into empowerment. I'm big into encouragement. I'm big into, oh, that's what you into? Cool, let's do it. And I'll do my best, you know, to figure out how to help that person embrace their dreams, man. Like, I think it's cool to have a dream. There's nothing wrong with, and there's nothing wrong with having a dream. And there's nothing wrong with not having a dream. The only thing I would say is don't knock someone else's dream if you don't have dreams. Don't do that. Like,
yeah,
don't
knock someone else's dream at all, because that's what makes us who we are. Well, I have a question for you then, because it kind of relates to this. Well, what would future you or you now say to you, you know, young you, if you went back, say, 30 years or whatever, you know?
My younger self, what would I say? I would say a lot of things. I'm like, keep smiling, man. Keep having fun. Just stay focused. Don't worry about anyone else around you. Like just stay focused. People can become a distraction, you know, whether it's your friends or dating or family members. And there's nothing wrong with speaking up for yourself. And that's what I teach my kids. I'm like, so I do that with my kids. I'm like, speak up for yourself. I tell them, like, if dad says something that upsets you, you say, hey, dad, I like that. And I'm like, and I'll ask what you mean. I'm like, and I'll say, explain to me so I can learn. Because like, I'm just doing what my brain tells me to do. Sometimes I don't think, you know, you just react. And if it hurts you, how do I better myself? I'm like, and that's the thing, you know. I think I would tell my younger self, Chevar, to tell these adults who traumatized them, like, yo, this is what you did to me. But back then, you know, kids weren't allowed to speak up. You're a disrespectful child. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, but I would tell them like how this is how you would tell that person, or get your parent involved. Like, hey, let's have a discussion. You know, and that's what I do with my kids. I need to talk to the teacher. I need the teacher sitting here so we can have a discussion, because I want to know why you felt the way to say the things you said. You know, or you know, and why my son or daughter felt that way, because that's the only way to grow. And I think adults need to let go, because adults harbor ill will towards children. If they like, oh, well, he or she disrespected me, and I'm like, I hate this saying. If anyone who's listening, stay in your child's place, right? We always say it to a child who acts out, who's disrespectful, who speaks up for themselves, blah, 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 right? That's almost like a supervisor mentality, right? Because your supervisor says to you, don't do this, blah, 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 right? And our main able to say is like, you tell a child not to do this, they don't come to school late when you come to work late.
Right.
Don't curse when you're cursing, right? Don't do these things. I'm like, practice what you preach. You know, you can't go out of your way. You can do whatever you want. But I'm saying, like, to go out of the way and berate someone and put someone down, and you're just as bad as what you're telling someone not to do. That part bothers me personally. Like that kind of eats in my core. Like I would have like staff saying, "Oh, the kid is out of doesn't have their shirt on." I'm like, "But you don't have your shirt on, but I let you stay at work." Like, come on. Like, and technically, if I send you home, you make no money. If the child sends this son home, you know, the parent. Like, and I mean, I wasn't trying to be a jerk about it. I'm like, you can't say one thing and not do the other thing. Like, that's how I feel. And I'm
I agree.
sometimes victim. I'm sometimes victim to that also, where I might do that, but then I'll catch myself and I'll go back and I'll apologize. I did this and I know it was wrong, and I'm gonna try my best not to do that again. So again, I would say to my younger self, it's gonna be all right, man. You will figure it out. Have fun. Don't be afraid. Because I have I have tons of confidence, but I have tons of fear at the same time, if that makes sense. Like, don't be afraid. You'll be successful. You will be King Chevar. And that's what I would say to myself. What about you?
Oh, I think about that sometimes, and part of me doesn't know if I'd say anything, only because I'm here because of where I was.
Right.
But I think I might tell my younger self to just take the time to really understand and feel my feelings.
Right.
Because I had a tendency to just go from really happy to really angry without feeling the stuff in between. And I think because my household was angry, so I that's how the only way I knew to react. I never learned how to really react appropriately to other feelings. So I might take that, but I also would say just live out your dreams. Do the things that speak to you, that you feel passionate about. Don't let anyone tell you you can't. Because
Absolutely.
whatever you decide you can do, if you believe in it and you work hard enough, you're going to do it. And I would let myself know that. And then I'd also tell myself, I know you're going to dabble in drugs when you're younger and alcohol, but look at the people in your family who have been addicted. And just get to know who they are and what their path was. Only so, I didn't really understand that till I got into recovery. And I looked back over my family tree and saw how much addiction there was. If I'd had a little more of a heads up, I don't know, maybe I would have been able to take another path. Maybe not. I don't know. But I think those would be the things I'd focus on most, just, and don't sweat the small stuff. Enjoy your life. Yeah.
One other thing I would say to my younger self, and you kind of alluded to this earlier, you said this, it's your choice. Whatever you do is your choice. Like, and you just rock out. Like, whatever you do is your choice. Like, it's you that has to deal with those consequences, or you have to deal with those, or celebrations and so forth.
Yeah, and maybe actually to my college age self, I might have said, and stop trying to date men, because that's not where you're going to end up. And you're going to waste a lot of years. But, well, I think we have time for maybe another question or two.
Sure. I always have questions. And this is a question I usually ask a lot of people. I ask myself this also. How do you define family?
How do I define family?
What does family mean to you?
Funny, I was just actually answering some questions on this. I belong to this online community where they do surveys and stuff, and you earn Amazon gift cards and stuff. And it was, what does family mean to you? And family to me it goes beyond blood. It's people who love you for who you are and are honest enough to tell you when they don't think you're right, or to let you know when something you're doing doesn't sit right with them, but also is there to praise you and be truthful. I guess it's just people who have my back, people who love me, who will be there for me no matter what. And they will love me on my darkest days. They will love me on my brightest days. And I look at my family, and when I think of my family, I think of my friends. They were my family first, and my wife, my dogs. It's my family of choice, not necessarily my family of origin. I have a few family members left of family of origin, but most of my family are the people I've met along the way who have always been there for me, no matter what. And I've always been there for them, where it's a mutual relationship, where knowing that I can count on them, they can count on me. And like I said, they're going to love me no matter what, even on the days when I can't love myself, and I'm going to do the same for them. So for me, that's what family is. It's pretty basic. So
well, that's that basic.
Well, not
it's
basic,
amazing.
but it's amazing. Pretty cut and dry. It's like, this is
Well, I'm similar to how I define family, or what does it mean to me. It's the people around me. It's the people who check in on me. It's the people that I check in on. It's the people who, because I have friends in all walks of life, like literally all walks of life. And I don't hold that against them, and they consider me family, and I consider them family. I know if I go through certain hoods, like that's Var. Don't bother him. You know, from back in the days, we cool. That's fam. That's family to me. That's family. Like anyone who I come across, like they embrace me, like yo, like a big hug. You know, like I have friends who are, you know, like gangsters, street gangsters, and will see me and they would say, give me a hug. And they would say to me, men hug. And these are like scary people. You know,
I
like
love that.
men hug. And I'm like, because we grew up together, we know each other. And it's like, and it's not about, you know, like sometimes throw the toughness out the window. It's about being you and embracing the people that means the most to you. You know, a friend, family is like again, blood, you know, extended individuals. I consider you a family, Ronnie, you know.
I got you.
Anyone who supports me, who believes in me, who encourages me. I mean, who if they criticize me, but also give me solutions. Just don't criticize me because I think that's just whack. Just tell me you don't like what I do and don't tell me a solution. Like that's kind of like you sound like a hater.
Right.
But,
or help me find one.
Oh yeah, help me find a solution. Like, you know, just don't like you just I'm being honest though. That's being a jerk. But that's my opinion. But yeah, the people or person who checks up on me, who helps me through the thick and thin, the person who I can 5 years I haven't seen them, or 10 years I haven't seen them, like, you know, they see me and they're glowing, like, oh my God, I haven't seen you forever. Let's talk for an hour, 2 hours. Like that's family, you know, like someone like, yo, this is people see me like this is fam. That's what they say. They like, this is fam.
Yeah.
like that's your real family. No, that is my real family. We're not related, but we've gone to bat together. We've done things together. We've gone to school together. Like they've eaten at my mom's house. I've eaten at their house. You know, we played sports together. You know, we written graffiti together. Yes, I'm gonna throw graffiti in there. Written graffiti together. You know, we've done so much. We've done you know, those are my family. You know, people who when I'm gonna say this last thing. People would, because I'm a genuine person. I'm a kind-hearted person. When people find out that wrong has happened to me, they get upset. They're like, dude, someone did something wrong to you?
Yeah, I get that too.
So that's family to me.
Yeah. I see all of that, and I hear what you're saying. I mean, I mentioned to you, I recently started getting together with my college friends.
Right.
I mean, we were together at Queensboro Community College in like 1970, 71.
Wow.
And a lot of us hadn't seen each other since maybe mid-70s, maybe once in the 80s. And now we get together once a month on Zoom. Nice. And we just fall right into it. Nothing. It's like we didn't miss a day. You know, when I was moving back to New York 7 years ago, I came to New York to look for a place. I was here for 2 weeks, staying in hotels, just really having a hard time. I had the 2 dogs, and I had to find something fast and find something affordable. And my dear friend Pat, who I hadn't seen in years, we'd been in touch though, had me to her house and took me out and gave me homemade food. And you know, we'd been together in college. It was just amazing. I knew I was home when I went to her house. Maybe that's it too. Maybe family for me is where I feel I'm home.
Yeah.
In the presence of that person or those people. It's like there's a feeling inside of me that says, you're home.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Well, I think that's maybe a good place to end this part 1 of Host. Maybe this is something we do every few months.
Yeah, I liked it. It was good. It was therapeutic.
Yes, very therapeutic. But no, Chevar, I mean, I consider you family too. And I feel like you're my brother.
Thank you, sister.
Even though I'm old enough to be your mother.
Oh, man.
But our souls don't have chronological ages. You know, so I mean, sometimes I can be on the same level as an 8-year-old, and other times I could be on the same level as an 80-year-old or a 40-year-old.
Likewise.
Yeah. I think that's a key to being able to respect people no matter what their age. You know, like not talking to like young people. I always hated when when the people I work with say, "What's wrong with them? These are the best years of their lives." I'm like, "Are you kidding? You remember being happy when you were 15? I wasn't. I was miserable."
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, those are tough years.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
But
Definitely.
anyway, this was great, and I guess we're kind of out of time, and nobody interrupted you today.
Not today.
But it's great always getting to know a little bit more about you.
Thank you. Likewise. And we will continue this, like you said, in a few more months. And for the listeners, this is the solution.
Nothing changes.
If we change nothing.
All right. Have a good one. We'll see you again soon.